Hi, I hope that you are all doing well. Thank you so much for joining me here today, where we're going to talk about books. Since it is the end of the year, I thought it'd be fun to take a look back at the books that I've read this year and pick my favorites. And I read a lot of books in 2021, possibly the most that I've ever read. When I read the books that I use for the videos, and I also read books for me personally. And they can be very different kinds of books. So to make this fair, I'm going to do my top books from the books that I read for the videos, and then afterwards we'll follow up with my top books from the other books that I've read. So favorite books for me are books that affect me in certain ways. So books that introduce me to another's life experience that's different from my own, or books that resonate with me on some level, so where the characters like me, or where I've dealt with similar issues and I get to read about how other people dealt with those issues, or books that are written in an entirely new, different, and refreshing way. So we're going to start with the books from the videos. What I did was I came up with categories for my favorites. So, from our videos, we've got favorite contemporary fiction is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. My favorite historical fiction was The Forest of Stolen Girls by June Her. My favorite mystery was Even If We Break. I read this early in the year and I've talked about it a lot since then. I really enjoyed the way it was written and trying to figure out what was going on. My favorite novel in verse, Punching the Air by Ibi Zoboi and Yousef Salaam. This was an enlightening look at how there can be long-lasting effects from the way that you're perceived in school. So if school isn't a good experience for you, that can end up affecting you in ways that you didn't realize, and just about making those things more fair for everybody. So my favorite graphic novel was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I found this very interesting. It was well written, and the mix of the images and the story were fabulous together. My favorite fairy tale retelling, I don't have the book here, it is checked out currently, but it was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. So it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but it is done in an uplifting, positive, and refreshing way. My favorite ghost story of the year is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. The most surprising series ending was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This was so different than the other two, just completely different book, but totally worth reading. I really do recommend that series. And my favorite new series is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a retelling of King Arthur, but it also brings in African American history and spiritual practices. It's so good, I can't wait to see what happens in the other books. And my favorite book that was just fun is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. And I know this is an older book, but I just read it this year, and I really do like this book, and I recommend it. So those were my favorites of the books that I read for the videos. Here's my new Christmas mug. I just thought I'd take a sip of tea. And now, on to my favorites of the books that I read personally. There's books from various time periods, so some of them are contemporary and some of them are classics. But here we go. My favorite contemporary fiction was Let It Snow by John Green, Maureen Johnson, and Lauren Miracle. And this is 3 many shorter stories that go together to form a larger story. And it was really good. And my favorite new fantasy series is Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Call. It's about Aneb. He is living with one person who's raising him who believes one thing. He's going to school, in a private school, to learn to do something else, and he's got to kind of put this all together and figure out what he believes in and try to do what is best for everyone. My favorite mystery, and this one is not really old, but I know that a lot of people have already read it, and it is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I think I read this in like a weekend. I really liked it. It's a dark academia. It's got a lot of Shakespeare throughout the story, which I really enjoyed. I'm a big fan of Shakespeare, so this was really good. The most unexpected book, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I really can't even explain it, but it's really good. So if you like something that's a little different, you might like this. My favorite YA series that I read this year is the Folk of the Air series, which starts with The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was just really good. If you like fairies and a struggle to rule, you'll probably like this one. My favorite book with short essays, which is in fact the only book on either of these lists that is nonfiction, is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. He had a podcast of the same name. This is a book with essays very similar to the podcast. It's really good. The podcast has helped me on a number of days to get through some tough things, and reading it has also helped. So my favorite series that I read this year is the Darker Shade of Magic series by B.E. Schwab. This is the first book. I just can't say enough good about this series. I really enjoyed it. My favorite classic that I read in 2021 is Bleak House by Charles Dickens. It's a bit of a long one, kind of dramatic, but it's a really interesting story. My favorite science fiction book of the year is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It's really hard to explain what happens in this, but it is really, really amazing. And the book in 2021 that was the first book that I read by an author that I had never read before, that introduced me to an author that I really love her work. It is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by B.E. Schwab. I love this book. I read it twice this year. And there you have it. Those are my favorite books of 2021. And I am so excited for 2022. And I am making plans for my reading already. I'll share my goals with you in an upcoming video, which will be not the first video of 2022, but within the first couple weeks of 2022. And then you'll know what I hope to achieve with my reading, and we'll talk about a couple other things. Before that, I'll be back with what I'm reading in January. I hope you'll join me for another year of talking about books, exploring STEM, and creating. I'll see you soon, and I hope that 2022 is your best year yet. And thank you.